safely off the podium, can I ask our next four panelists to step smartly up? John Martin, Neil McManus, Mike Wright, and Roland Aurich. Now, that session was designed to showcase some examples of UK excellence, but of course, there are plenty of non-UK companies with parent corporate headquarters around the world who have chosen the UK as a base for at least some of their operations. Why is that? Well, let's see if we can answer that. Four speakers, and by the way, gentlemen, if any of you want to stand up here at the lectern to give a presentation, I am happy to cede it. I'm not being territorial about this, but we seem to get by perfectly happily with everybody sitting down on that last session. John Martin is Senior Vice President of Manufacturing and Supply Chain Management at Nissan Europe. John, as before, 1 minute, please, to fill us in on yourself and your company.
Okay, well, I'm responsible for all of Nissan's manufacturing, purchasing and supply chain management in Europe and also in South Africa. That comprises of 7 manufacturing plants, one of which, the biggest of which, is in the UK. We were the first Japanese car manufacturer, founded in 1933 with the help of the old Austin Motor Company. Our very first car built in Yokohama was an Austin, in what's called a CKD kit, a complete knockdown kit. So our links with the UK as a corporation run very deep and very, very long. Our operations in the UK, we design, we style, and we make cars in the UK. We've got the biggest car factory in the United Kingdom. This year we'll make 517,000 cars in Sunderland. It's the most productive car plant in Nissan. We've doubled our productivity in the last 6 years, and we've halved our unit labor costs over 10 years. But we also have an R&D centre in Cranfield, which is about 50 miles, 81 kilometres north of London, and we have a styling centre located in Paddington, which is home to 60 of the most creative automotive designers at the moment in the industry.
Okay, Neil McManus is Vice President and Managing Director of Spirit AeroSystems, which is based in Kansas. It's the world's largest independent airframe supplier. Tell us more, Neil.
So yes, we're the world's largest airframe supplier to both Airbus and Boeing. Total turnover $4.8 billion and just over 15,500 employees within the US, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and Malaysia and China. Our European operations are based here in the UK. We represent 12% of the total turnover of the business, very much wing orientated to both Airbus and Boeing. And we deliver about a third of the wing that goes into the build here in the UK, and very much involved in research and development here in the UK, wing focused for the aviation industry.
Mike Wright is Executive Director at Jaguar Land Rover, two very famous names in the British motor industry, now part of Tata Motors. Mike, you have a minute.
Yeah, Jaguar Land Rover, one company, but obviously two very prodigious brands in terms of their heritage, but also their future. We employ 22,000 people here in the UK, and that's growing, as you've heard from the press. We have a revenue turnover of about 13 billion at the moment, and that's increasing. 85% of that revenue now comes from our overseas markets. We're represented in 177 markets, slightly less than the Olympic participation, but almost as many markets. All of our research and design and engineering and innovation is based here in the UK at our two centres, one at Gaydon near Warwick and the other one at Whitley near Coventry. And we have a strong association with the universities on our innovation and research and design, with a strong association with Warwick University, but other universities as well. We have 3 manufacturing plants in the UK, one near Birmingham, one near Solihull, and one in Liverpool. And of course, we're just developing our own engine plants in Wolverhampton that will open in a couple of years' time.
And finally, Roland Aurich, Chief Executive of Siemens in the UK and Northwest Europe, a household name, of course, active in lots of sectors: energy, healthcare, infrastructure. An extra minute on the company and yourself, sir.
Well, I'm a proud chief executive of 13,000 people here in the UK. And I'm also proud of that out of those 13,000 employees, 8,000 are directly engaged in manufacturing and engineering. which also gives a bright light on the Siemens activities. We are not here just for a means of being a global company, and we need to find a spot where we do business. It's really where we see the market potentials for Siemens. That's also why we have been in UK now for almost 170 years, 170 years, which is longer than we have an established headquarters in Germany. The Germans are not very pleased to hear that, by the way. We are, as you said, active in different fields. What we try to say is that we actually put innovation at the forefront. And for us, innovation means that we are putting answers to the toughest questions the globe is facing. And those are the demographics, the urbanization, the climate change issues, and the globalization as such. We provide technology to really give lots of you, as our very honored customers, a higher productivity, a higher competitiveness, but also delivers infrastructure for the next generations to come, to have cleaner air to breathe and a much cleaner and greener planet to live on.
Okay, John, I bought, because I'm interested in black and white photographs of gleaming old motor cars, I bought a short history of the British motor industry the other day, and it said that Britain no longer had a motor industry, which of course is nonsense. We don't have a British-owned motor industry, but we still make, I think it is 1.3 million cars a year. And Nissan, as you said, is a very big success story. Amplify a little the reasons for that success, and why does Nissan keep investing here?
Well, why do we keep on investing? I think it's a bit like, if you build it, they will come. The fact is we have a very expensive facility here in which we've invested just under 4 billion euro, just over 3 billion pounds. But we do have in the product pipeline at the moment 4 new models, including the world's first mass-produced electric vehicle. And we're also building the batteries in Sunderland, which are very advanced lithium-ion batteries, high capacity. The reason why, though, we came to the UK in the first place is there is a very deep and wide pool of engineering and creative talents here in the UK. As I said before, we design, we style, and we build the cars here. And many of the cars that we have on sale outside of Europe were styled here in Paddington. So that goes to the very essential, we're talking about the hard nuts and bolts here of manufacturing, but the fact is manufacturing is one part of the supply chain. It has to be supported by the R&D effort and the styling effort. Styling in cars is very important. So we came here because of the creative talents and the engineering talents.
Something we touched on in the previous session, are you finding that talent is being renewed in sufficient quantities? We've heard other people suggest that it's a struggle to find the qualified people.
Okay, look, I've had the privilege of working in the United States as a corporate officer for Nissan. Most recently, I served 3 years in Japan, and I've moved back in April of this year to Europe. I've become very frustrated with the attitude of manufacturers, frankly, who complain about lack of skills. I view the role of government is to give us basically educated people. Our job is to grow the essential skills that we need. If there's a shortage of skills, I tend to look inward and say, what am I doing to fix my shortage? And I think there's not enough of that thinking in the UK. We have to look inward, we have to grow our own apprenticeships, grow our own skilled engineers, because the fact is, I cannot buy on the open market, straight from university, a person who's well educated on lithium-ion batteries. I can't do it. So what I do is I hire a very good, solidly trained engineering or science graduate, and I teach them about lithium-ion technology. That's my role.
Neil, Spirit is based here in the UK. At Prestwick, you bought the BAE Systems plant there, which incidentally Jonathan Neal, in an earlier life, used to run before he got into the motor racing business. He was in the aerospace business, so he'll be listening very carefully to what you say now. What was it about British high-value manufacturing that attracted Spirit? Why make that purchase?
Well, I think first and foremost, like Nick Clegg really sort of hit on it this morning. The UK aerospace industry is the largest in Europe. It's the second in the world. So it's a great place to be because we're right in terms of a great growth area itself. But then from that, it essentially comes down to the skills and the capabilities of the people we've got, the organization we've got. We're primarily an aircraft integrator of structure. We integrate tests. We don't actually make parts in the UK. We tend to globally source that within the UK and overseas. So the skill base to be able to take such a complex organization structure, source that globally, meet the customer's requirements by way of offset and the like, bring it into the UK, assemble, integrate and test, and ship that out day in, day out at a regular drumbeat without fault is absolutely essential. You know, we're providing about a third of the wing for the world's highest production rate wing. You know, there's product going from Prestwick to the Broughton factory in North Wales daily. Then on top of that, then being able to translate that into this great shift from metallic-based aircraft into composite-based aircraft, and the technologies that go with that, and the innovation, and both transferring some of that knowledge and, from the US, and then having the skill sets to build and develop those in the UK, have been absolutely essential to our growth. We've expanded the workforce by about 20-25% since the acquisition 7 years ago, and we continue to grow and build a European business, moved into MRO, into maintenance, repair and overhaul, major R&D focus, and participating in the global UK, the total UK R&D drive in the aerospace industry as well.
Mike, Jaguar Land Rover continuing to develop, clearly the sort of intellectual heart of the company is still very much here. What are the positives that you identify about operating in the UK? And was it you in your opening remarks who talked about the skill shortage? And if so, if it was, how do you respond to what John was saying?
I didn't talk about the skills shortage because I agree absolutely with John, so I think it was in the earlier session. But for us, there's often a misunderstanding about what a car manufacturer is. They think we just make cars and forget that at the front end, there's a huge amount of product development, engineering, innovation, research. And that takes a number of years. It's not just a sort of 6-month job. It takes an enormous amount of time. So for us to have a kind of totally integrated activity that starts with the research and the innovation at one end, right the way through to manufacturing with fairly good geographic adjacencies, means that we can do this in a faster and a more parallel way rather than do it sequentially, sort of passing one bit of knowledge on to the other. You know, the UK has got a fantastic reputation overseas for its design and engineering capability. And clearly our brands, I mean, people don't buy cars from a company, they buy cars because of the brand. And actually more outside of the UK than here in the UK. The British involvements, the fact that we're based here in the UK, the association with high quality design, high quality engineering is extremely important to our consumers. And they're matching us to other premium brands that frankly aren't based here, they're based just over the channel. We have to make sure that globally we're competitive with them, but that capability that we have in this country is something that our consumers really identify with. And we're investing an enormous amount of not only money, but people skills, working with the education community, making sure that in the short term we've got the capability, but most importantly, in the long term, and that means over 10, 15 years, we've got a sustainable business here.
Geographic adjacency, that's a fancy way of saying just down the road. Does that still, in this era of global supply chains, count for something?
I think it means that if your engineering centre and your design centre is near your manufacturing, it means that you do have advantages. That doesn't preclude the fact that you need a global manufacturing footprint, and it's no secret, incrementally to our UK manufacturing base, for us to grow, we have to be manufacturing in markets around the world. It's sort of as well as, not an instead of.
Roland, you made the point that Siemens has been here for very nearly 170 years, and clearly one reason why you're still here is because of that heritage. But let me ask you a question I've asked others as well. What is it about the climate and the environment here in the UK that keeps Siemens investing in its businesses in Britain?
Well, I think we all know that the growth in Europe and in the UK kind of is not where we would like to see it, but there are always pockets in the markets, and they are kind of two-folded. I think we do and deliver and engage with customers which are really on the high end and on the edge of technology, because that fosters us to produce products and systems to you to make sure you really can advance your competitiveness and make sure the UK export is increasing. The other way of doing business and why UK is attractive is the heritage is one thing. And there is a good capacity of innovation in the UK, and we need just to tap a bit more effectively into that. And that's based on the heritage, but it's also on the way forward. For instance, the offshore wind, where we are very active. There is a chance for the UK to take a dominant position because it's simply the largest global market of offshore wind. And I think we need also to understand that if you have a big market, you will also most likely localize a lot of your activities because it makes business sense. So UK for us is growth pockets, markets which are growing. It's really a high end, a high edge of technology which attracts us as a supplier, where we can supply you, and I'm happy to be around lots of our very important and honored customers, to really supply you the productivity tools and means to make sure you have a higher competitiveness. And we see that in our own manufacturing in UK as well. 4.5 billion turnover on a year, last fiscal year. Over 1 billion year by year goes on export, and this is a growing number. We do also understand we can't produce everything in every country around the globe. But that's where we also use our global setup to make sure that we can deliver the latest of the technologies into a market and then use the supply chain to enhance our value add in the UK. So we are actually working on different fronts. And we mentioned about engineering skill. Siemens was, since 20 years, there hasn't been a new engineering school in the UK. Together with the Lincoln University, we established a new engineering school, a new engineering university in Lincoln, very close to our gas turbine manufacturing. Of course, we have an own interest in developing engineering, but I think it's also a demonstration how valuable we see that the focus on STEM, the focus on engineering, needs to start with all different means, big bangs, the catapults, and all those initiatives which are ongoing on different layers, and really start early to attract the young generation. That's the key for us to get the right employers. And again, I think also from a government perspective, it's interesting to focus engineering because we mainly have high value jobs. And it's a value creation which then again leads to more of the service operations to be enhanced. So it's not just the STEM, the engineering and the manufacturing jobs. It's really what power that focus has for the rest of the UK and the rebalancing of the UK economy.
John, you want to come in?
Yeah, I want to again go back to this issue of engineering skills and how important it is in terms of attracting new investors to the UK. I'll give you some figures. In 1999, the factory in Sunderland, the Nissan factory, built 271,000 cars with 5,000 people. Last year, we built 483,000 cars, that's 77% more, with 5,400 people. That massive jump in productivity, which halves our unit labor costs, and we are a high-cost country, you know, that massive jump in productivity, half of it came from engineering activity, designing the car smarter so that it's easier to build. The other half came from raw mind power and muscle power. But the crucial issue is to remember that manufacturing is almost the end part of the manufacturing cycle. It's the design and the engineering, and we need those skills, but I go back to it again. The initiative that was just mentioned about teaming up with local universities, local colleges, we've done the same with Gateshead College. They have built a purpose-built college to feed us assembly workers. Because building a car is a very difficult thing to do. You're doing something that nature doesn't want you to do. You're building something consistently the same way every day, day in, day out. You know? So the fact is, you need to even train those people on the shop floor. We measure the number of training cycles, the number of times a man has to do a job or a woman has to do a job before they're competent. In the UK, it's 103 times before we consider them competent. What was amazing, we went to India, and straight off the mat, a country with very small manufacturing heritage in motor vehicles, 107. China was 88. Because they are already giving their kids that desire to work in manufacturing and the fundamental skills we need coming out of school. The government is focusing on education for employability, and that's what they've got to continue focusing on.
Right, let's throw this open. We've 10 minutes or so of questions, contributions. Anybody want to quarrel with anything? I haven't taken any questions from down that end. And hello, two hands go up. Gentleman in the striped tie, and then the lady next to him.
My name is Roger Bone, and I'm the president of Boeing in the UK, and therefore the other half of the duopoly that was referred to a little earlier. And spirit is very important to us in the UK as it is in the United States. And I wanted to make more by way of a comment than a question at this point. And the comment is this, that we've done business in this country for something like 70 years, not 170, but about 70. And our dependence on the supply chain here is absolutely extraordinary. Traditionally, the UK has been the biggest supplier to Boeing outside the United States. At this point, the UK is number 2 or number 3. It's an increasingly competitive business. But we still depend heavily on what happens here, and we have links with something like 250 members in the supply chain in the UK. We also invest fairly heavily in Formula One, which was mentioned a little earlier, not with McLaren, but with Lotus Renault. We admire particularly the rapid prototyping that is done inside the Formula One business. But the point I wanted to make is this, that it's absolutely essential at this stage that the UK maintains the investment in the research, the development, and the skills base in order to retain that competitive edge globally, to be able to service large multinational companies like Boeing in the way that they have in the past. And if I may say so, we admire and we like what we see in the UK at this point in terms of the emphasis that government is putting on encouraging an improvement and sustaining of the skills base here. There's an awful lot to be done, but the right start is being made to that. And on behalf of my company, I can say that we're confident that we will go on doing business here for as far ahead as I can see. Thank you.
That's very encouraging. Would you pass the microphone on to the lady 2 seats away from you, please? No, other direction. Forgive me.
Hello, Julia King, Vice-Chancellor of Aston University and Non-Executive Director of the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. First, let me give you some good news, which is that although you may have heard that university applications in England have dropped something like 9% this year, they have held up extremely well in engineering, and we are increasingly attracting even more outstanding overseas students into our engineering courses as well. But then let me ask the panel a question, if I may, which is that you will know, I'm sure, that the government and BIS is developing the industrial strategy at the moment and is very keen to have the views of business and industry into that. What would be your one wish for something in this new industrial strategy?
New industrial strategy. Who wants to go first? Mike?
It's a very complicated question, and there's a lot of debate going on at the moment. But from our perspective, I think if there's one wish, as I think we've heard this morning, advanced manufacturing is an extremely complex process and business. It touches virtually all areas of manufacturing activity, engineering activity. And if government could have their departments talk to each other in the same way, rather than just respond department by department to the challenge, I think industry, certainly speaking for Jaguar Land Rover, we would find an even more stronger relationship in building what is a fundamental, sustainable challenge for us. Governments change every 3 or 4 years or 5 years, depending on where we are in the cycle. our business decisions and our strategic investments go out 10, 15, 20 years. And we need some form of continuity of policy, continuity of approach, and common approach from all the departments that we touch on would be my one request.
Good luck with that. No disparaging of governments. Neil, and then Roland.
I think from the aerospace industry, we've got a really strong partnership with government at the moment. We're working really closely together on the Aerospace Growth Partnership, and you'll hear about that this afternoon, led by both Dr. Vince Cable and Mark Prisk in BIS. So really strong relationship there. And that's focused very heavily on innovation, technology, manufacturing, both advanced manufacturing and that we require for the future, and also then developing the supply chain, and very much so the competitiveness of the supply chain in the UK to go and meet those challenges. And just as we said, in our industry, we are talking about long cycles, well beyond government terms. So therefore, we're talking about investments for 2020, 2025, and just making those decisions now. And we've got a very high level of engagement with government. Great support, 60 million announced over the last couple of months around an aerodynamics catapult type centre to focus around, wings. We talked about being so important. It's all about aerodynamics, same for engines. Starting to focus now in terms of what do we do around competencies in the supply chain. So keeping that drive, laying out a plan, which we are doing over 3 phases for the next 15 years is great, and then keeping that continuity thereafter.
Roland.
Well, many countries are putting very much money into R&D and making sure the engineering and technology is ahead of other countries. I just spent a couple of years in Canada. I think Canada has one of the largest proportion of R&D funding, which basically doesn't help unless you measure output. And I think we have a good regime in UK. The corporate tax system is okay. There are good initiatives like the catapults and others where I feel confident that it's really a good regime supporting R&D. I think one point I would like to make is we need to focus on the output. Markets out there are not waiting for the UK supply chain or technologies to just conquer the rest of the world. They are running fast as well. So we need to be aware of that. And I think to your point about consistency, we need a regime that is predictable for the future, because this is not a sprint relating to the Olympics. This is a marathon. It needs to be going on and on and on. And we need to have a focus and a clear focus on that. I think there is a cross-party alignment on this. I think just need to push that further on and make sure that we take those small wins all at a time, and then make sure that the UK has a competitive edge. But again, measuring output, I think, is the essential one when we talk about funding and putting new vehicles up to enhance R&D and engineering.
John, one thing at the top of your wish list?
Yeah, I sit on the BIS steering committee for this long-range manufacturing plan for the UK. One of the issues that I've made very clear, we need to look at the small and medium-sized enterprises that will generate the vast amount of employment in the UK. If we consider, for example, the factory in the Northeast, our factory has 5,400 employees, but there are 26,000 employees in the small and medium enterprises that support the factory. Now, I was very clear when I talked to Vince Cable about our labour legislation in the UK is I think, well-balanced. It strikes a good balance. But I say that from the context of somebody with a huge HR department. And I'm sure if I talk to some of the SMEs in the audience, they will look at it and say, well, that's very well for you to say. You can support the maternity leave, the paternity leave, the sickness rights, and so on. I can't. So I do think there needs to be a tiering of entitlement, if you will. And I think we have to learn to support the SMEs through targeted legislation that makes it easier for them to hire and fire. Again, if we look at some of the cases that are surrounding us right now in Europe, there's a quite simple reason why some of our European competitor nations find it difficult to generate jobs. Because it's very difficult to close down jobs. And they think that protects jobs. Well, it doesn't. The easiest way to create jobs is make it easy to hire and make it easy to fire. And I'm not saying create virtual slavery at all. I'm saying make it business friendly.
That's
And
an
we've got to do
area
that
in
for the
which you
SMEs.
might have difficulty getting cross-party agreement, of course. Anybody else? We've got time for a couple of other very quick ones. Anybody else want to come in? Yes, lady over there.
Hello, I'm Sophie Peachy from Auxilium Research. We provide high-value innovation services across the aerospace and automotive industry, including for Spirit and Jaguar Land Rover. My question really is to John. I was very interested in your comment about creating your own skills. We've had comment already about the supply chain and making it more competitive. I've got 2 innovation projects at the moment that are looking specifically at how to make the supply chain more effective and more robust and resilient. And I'm wondering if there's anything that Nissan is doing particularly to look at improving robustness and resilience in its supply chain.
Very short answer.
Yeah, I hate to tell you, you've probably asked the right person. I was responsible for the global supply chain in Nissan, and I was the recovery corporate vice president for the earthquake. A title I didn't like, because essentially if there was no recovery, there was no recovery corporate vice president. So fundamentally, the issue in the supply chain is about making sure they understand their responsibilities. I work with tier 1 suppliers. I have very little interest in managing the tier 2 and the tier 3. You know? And the reason for that is I just don't have enough resources to do it. So when I work with a tier 1 supplier, I make sure he has supply chain management processes that manage the tier 2 to the tier N. That's what I do. And I then hold him accountable for making sure that happens. That's exactly the same as you, the buying public, do with me. You trust me to build a car that works, that starts every morning, that stops when you need it to stop. Fundamentally, the key issue about supply chain, and if I was to pick out a weakness that's common in every region, is people fail to understand the risks in their supply chain. And that's the reason why Nissan recovered first from the earthquake.
Right.
We recovered first because we knew where the risks were. And I don't think many people do.
Anybody else want to come in on this very quickly before I close this down and everybody goes off and has a well-deserved cup of coffee? Yes, Neil? No? Okay. No? Right, excellent. In that case, my thanks to all 4 of our panelists, to John Martin, to Neil McManus, to Mike Wright and Roland Aurich.